Welcome to SynergyMMS Corporate Reporting. This is our new above property tool that allows regional managers, corporations, those in positions that might oversee multiple properties or research data for multiple properties to gain access to that from our archive database. The first step in corporate reporting is to log in. As you can see, this is a web form, so one of the other benefits of corporate reporting is it's available on any platform, essentially being an HTML5 application. You can run it on an iPad, on an iPhone, in Chrome, in Safari, in Explorer, any number of browsers. So it's quite flexible and allows you access on whatever device you might have and have handy. So I'm just going to log in real quick with this fictitious account. So the first thing you're going to see is a list of types of reports. This list may grow, so we won't investigate every report today, but we'll take a look at some of these, at least the major sections, so you can appreciate it. So we're looking for feedback from the field, obviously, to improve this product, as always. So as I said, you'll probably see different things at different times in here. A couple of things you want to notice: the report selection. This is the type of report up here. The current user is on the right. Down here we have groups. So what a group is a way for you to bundle properties, or even a single property, and run reports against that. So you might have groups of properties that are convention center properties, or downtown properties, or airport properties, or beachfront resorts, whatever. You might have some that are a group that are all managed by the same company, some way for you to group them together. There's a cluster approach, anything you want to do like that. There's a lot of flexibility with groups. Let me show you how to make one first of all. Here I have 5 memorized groups. Each of these is containing fictitious data. So within these groups, you'll see the number of properties listed. So this one has 5 properties, 55 properties, 1, etc. So if we want to make a group, we click on the Create a New Group. We can give this group a name if we wish. I'm going to skip that because that's going to be something you decide. But then the real good part about this is you can search for keywords. So let's say we're looking for properties that are in Dallas, for instance. So these are all the properties within this particular logged in user's audience, if you will, that are in Dallas. So what I mean by that is you might have a login that allows you to see some portion of properties as a maximum to begin with. A corporate level user might see all properties in an entire corporation, whereas a regional manager or a VP of some sort might see all the West Coast properties and only the West Coast properties versus the East Coast properties, etc. So it's just a way to control how much information you have to deal with and make it very personal. Users are set up by SAI, so we create those for you as an audience, and we can edit those as needed pretty easily. So with a small subset selected in Dallas here, I can check them all, and they then would become my Dallas group. So I would just save that as, call it Dallas, whatever, and then those properties would be in there. I'm going to cancel that. You can see I've got a San Francisco group right here. So these are the properties within the San Francisco group. So you'll find them in the list here. We're actually making a change to this interface probably in the next build where all selected properties will float to the top of the list. So that'll be something you can look forward to. This is where you might delete a group. So let's just cancel that. The other thing to think about is that groups are per user. So every person will have their own groups. You won't have to filter through a list of groups that don't mean anything to you because only yours will be there. So now let's talk about some of the other aspects of the report. So if we go into the Equipment Capital Planning report, for instance, let's take a look at that. And we have a favorite here. So this is a report I've already run, and I've found that I like this report. It's something I'm going to reference more than once. So I saved it as a favorite. Now the value of the favorite is you can come in here, and if you click on the name or description of the favorite, it will show you the criteria that made that favorite. This one happens to be a single property with one type of equipment. We might edit this to include install dates that are less than or greater than or equal to, warranty dates, age, useful life. These are all fields that are either calculated or part of Synergy that help you understand the equipment from that perspective. Let me show you some data. I think you'll better understand it. So I can either, as I just did, click on that to review the criteria and then run the report, or if I know this is a good one, I can just click on the little green ball and it will tell me how many records are coming back and then show me those records. We do that step with the demonstration of the records because it's important for you to understand how much data you're dealing with. Because at a corporate level, you can have reports that bring back literally millions of records, and so we tend to truncate that at 5,000 or so, just to keep your browser from locking up, which could happen. So just to make you aware of what's coming back. So in our typical report response, you're going to see below the columns of information that mean something, the data within, and then of course the totals along the bottom. And we'll talk a little bit more about how each of those works on another report that has more detail. So for instance, we have an equipment type of ice machines, and let's just say this blue arrow indicates that there's more data to the right. And in this case, more data to the left. When the arrow is no longer needed, in other words, you're all the way to the left, you don't see it. So if I go to the right and I look for health, now health is something that is essentially, let's just say less than 0. Sorry, greater than 0, excuse me, less than 0. So now I've got two ice machines that are of a lower health than 0. What that means is the age of the machine and its install date with its life expectancy figured in. So if it's only supposed to last a year, as in this case, and it's 2 years old, its health is going to be -1. So any machine might have a specific time frame according to standards as to how long it's supposed to last. And using the install date, we can figure out from a long list of machinery which of those might be a little past their replacement age according to standards. And so in this case, we might say, okay, well, we can see the maintenance costs and PM costs of each of those machines coming right out of Synergy at that local property. So if we just sort on PM cost, we can see pretty clearly that this ice machine, number 12 here at this property, is costing us a lot more in maintenance costs to maintain than the one next to it, which is of the same age or at least of the same health. So if we're making a capital equipment decision to say, well, which ice machine should I replace next, this data helps us decide how to do that. So again, very useful information we can utilize to do that. So one of the other things we can do, let me go back to this current report button you'll see right here. This will take me to the same place, let me close that, as this does. So if I want to do the current report, I can see what are the criteria of this report. And I could add then a pre-filter if I wish to say, only show me things with a health that are less than 0, or a maintenance cost that's more than $500, or a useful life, anything that should last 20 years, or things that are at least 10 years old, etc. Warranty date, install date. So any of these can be added as a filter to help reduce the data set that comes back. And you have the ability to filter on the top and bottom percentages of information, which I think in a future report that we'll review will show you a very valuable tool with that. So we have a section where we have filters, and the filters allow us in any column to reduce the information below to fine-tune it. There's a little help button right here that will show you how the filters work. So if I type any text above any column, it will match that text anywhere in the column. So if I'm looking for 12, and I type 12, there is only one 12. Now if I type ice, they're all going to have ice, so that's not going to change. If I want things where warranty date is this year, as I type 2014, these are all in warranty this year, so, or expiration date this year. So that's a text match. You also have where you're looking for a word within or something that matches exactly. And you have basic text searching, you have less than, equal to, greater than, equal to. You have not, so not being an exclamation point and then a value like not Bruce in this case. So it would find any record that did not contain the word you asked for. And these same filters that you're seeing here can typically be used in the pre-filter mechanism before you ever load the report. So these are something you can view at your convenience, and they're available on every page. Every report has that little help section. So now if I wanted to change reports, for instance, we're done with the capital planning one, we might go back to, for instance, the home button will take us back to the beginning where we can see all of our reports. So now let's pick the PM Agings report. Now, and again, I've already created a favorite because it shows good data that makes sense to you. And this is a demo database, so this is not an actual set of properties. It's just a sample data set. Let's just take a look at that one, remembering if we click the green ball, the report loads. 34 records. Okay, go ahead. So what we've done is we've asked for this particular PM schedule, guest room fan call PM, against the data set. So we have a series of properties in here: Orlando, Calgary, Puerto Rico, Boston, New York. So there's a bunch of different properties in here. And if we wanted to, we can show a chart. And we didn't see that before because the last form doesn't have a chart, but this one does. So now we have a pie chart. And if you want to see more about that pie chart, we can just look at it right here. So when I hover over, I get the values and the percentage. So maybe this chart isn't what we want to see. This is a PM aging report, which means how efficient are we at our PM process. So let's go down here and we'll change this to a column chart. And now it's starting to make sense. So if we're looking at this from a left to right flow, what this means is, because you can have multiple PM schedules that you're looking at, what this means is these PMs were completed within 25% of their interval. So a really good example would be a monthly PM. Right? So a monthly PM is generated, let's say, on the first of the month. If it was completed within the first week, which is 1/4 of that interval, it would fall into this bucket. If it was completed within the first 2 weeks of that month, it would fall into this bucket. And the first 3 weeks, etc., and on down the line. So what that tells you is not how often were these generated, but how efficient are we at completing them, which I think is a better metric. So we can tell that, of those generated, we tend to complete them, most of them, about halfway through the month before the next one generates. So we're good. We could be better, but we're good, at least this data set as it's shown. So you could also change the date range. So this one is currently looking at probably a year. So let's just click on our current report button, which again lets us review the settings for this report, our memorized favorite. And sure enough, yeah, last 12 months. So if we change that to custom, we'll be able to pick a start and end month date. Let's say May to November, and then we can run the report and see if we get any different results. And you can see the graph did move just a little bit. So there was a change in the data set coming back. So we have a lot of control over what we want to see. And remember that in this view, we have the ability to scroll right when there's an arrow showing to the right, and then scroll left when there's an arrow showing to the left. One other thing that's important to note is, again, you have the totals. When the chart initially loads in any view, when you first load the chart, you see the totals, and those would be the values down here. So if we select a property from the list, we can actually see the values of that specific property. So let's look at the Crestmore Orlando, for instance. Now this one's pretty good. However, most of their details fall in the second block. If we go to this particular one here, we see a much better data set result. We can select any property at once and see those up on the chart just by clicking on that one. All right, let's take a look at another report, which is the PM Origins report. We'll go back here. Now the PM Origins is essentially, where did it come from? Let's just go ahead and run a report. Let's pick a group. Now I'll let it go. Let's see how many records we get back. Okay, not bad. So the chart would probably help in this case. And so what we're looking at is, where do PMs come from when they're created by any property? In this case, all properties within our group. And you can see we've got a lot of properties listed here. There are a total of 234,000 records that are returned in this data set. So a pretty good data set, obviously very fast, which is good. So if we were to hover over there, we can see the values. Now this would probably make a little more sense if we're looking for those that are only using PM on demand. So we see there's a couple of zeros in here, there's some mediocre numbers. Now let's just say any of those that are greater than 0. So now we've got a slightly different change in the value, which is good. But if we wanted to see a particular property, we can just highlight that property, and then that data set will be reflected above. So here's Crestmore Alexandria, for instance. There's a Peachtree. Let's see, here is Aspen, 100% on demand. So why is this important data? Because it helps you understand how your properties as a whole, here's Seattle, are approaching the PM process. Do they let the generator generate PMs and they just process those as they're received, or do they take more of a manual intervention role in the process because they have access, they're using the information from the PMS or their staff availability and triggering PMs based on their own decisions as to when to do the work? It really depends on the property and your philosophy as to which one you prefer, but this data will help you decide how effective your teams are, your properties are at approaching PM. Let's take a look at a service agreement report. That would be the next one. We're going to skip this one because it's still being developed, but you'll be able to see it when it's posted up in the public. So this one is a service agreement report. Now this is obviously a TSYN contracts report. So now we've got all of that listed. We have a single vendor because we pre-filtered it. Let's just show you that. We have pre-filtered it for elevator type. That's what we want. And here's our elevator group because we created a group that has that in it. So now we have all of the service agreements that are upcoming currently with respect to one particular vendor, and these are the different properties that might have that particular vendor. So the value here is that when you have several properties that have the same vendor, you're able to perhaps do some bundle pricing with that vendor, having the intelligence and the understanding of what contracts might be expiring, for instance, this year. So if we type in 2015, these are all the contracts that are going to expire this year. It looks like June is a pretty heavy renewal month. However, there may be some expiring this month. So is anything expiring this month? Yes. There are 2 up in Ottawa that are expiring this month. So this might help you understand, oh, we need to act on this now. We can't wait until June because those are going to expire, and then we'll be subject to whatever pricing is offered. So having this information up at the corporate level, regional level, will help you decide how you want to process negotiations of contracts with vendors, and also what is the value of those contracts at different properties. It's just good visibility of that critical information for operating your properties. Moving back, we're going to go to the, let's go to the category property or report. Now this one says normalized for room count, and that's a really key feature that I want to show you. I want to show you normalized for room count first, and then I'm going to turn it off so you can see the difference. So work request by category is what are the most popular categories within any series of properties, in this case 119. And if you didn't notice that before, this shows you the number of properties that match your search criteria. So if I filter for only those with something wrong with doors or locks, you'll see there's 58 properties now out of 119 in my list. And I could go further to include only those with doors and locks and tub and shower, and now there are 52. So you have a quick reference to how many are in your current list based on the filtering criteria. So right now we have lighting, HVAC, tub, shower, doors, locks, etc. on down the line. The reason these are decimal formatted is what we've done is we've taken the number of requests that have been tracked over the date range, divided it by the room count. So in this case 319, 525, 700, etc. so that they flatten the numbers across the board. So all properties are now equal. So room count doesn't have that impact on numbers like it used to, having to figure out, well, that's a big hotel, that's why they have more complaints. This is now complaints per room or issues per room, which helps you flatten the data and really make more sense out of it. So let us take a look, for instance, at the chart. So here is the breakdown. This makes a little bit of sense to us. Lighting, HVAC. Lighting is a pretty big hit. HVAC, tub, shower, doors, locks, table, TV, etc., toilet. So pretty common issues that we might expect. If we change to any one property, for instance, Vancouver has a lot of tub shower issues. Why the disproportionate amount? Well, now we know where to go look for what. So it's opening our eyes as to where a potential problem might be. Why would over half of your issues be tub shower? Are these new fixtures? Did they get installed incorrectly? Do we have a riser problem in this property? I don't know, but now we know where we should probably go look for one. Let's switch to this property. That's a pretty even breakdown. So if we go to, we did that one already, sorry. If we go to another property like Dallas, let's try Dallas. So Dallas has a lot of lighting, HVAC, and doors and locks, but they don't have any plumbing issues. So maybe that's a new build or something like that. So it just allows us to see the data in a way that makes sense. So we can filter everything. Now here's something that's important. Let's go to those doors and windows, for instance. And we want to see any place where doors and windows is being reported. But now we're going to click on the header, and we're going to order it by doors and windows. First in ascending, and then in descending. Now this is what's important to look at. Now we're going to see the Crestmore Orlando has 1.7 doors and windows requests per room, and it's 1,500 room property. So that's a lot of requests. What's interesting is, by comparison, a lot of these other properties are smaller numbers, but it's hard to make sense of that value unless you can see them side by side. If I click inside this column, it will graph this data. You remember before, if I click in the property name, I see the data from the property. So for instance, here is South Coast Plaza, right? There we go. But if I click in doors and windows, now I see a breakdown of doors and windows. So that number being 1.7 versus 0.6, 0.5, 0.2 now makes a lot more sense when I see it compared to its peers. So as this property is compared to its peers, they have a lot more complaints for doors and windows, or issues of doors and windows, by a factor of 3 than any other property. So now seeing the data this way helps me understand, okay, there's probably something going on. Either they're being left open if they have that ability, or they're older, or whatever. But now I know what to go look for within that property to do my research as a director. I mentioned before I was going to show you normalized for room count. So let me just edit this report by clicking on that. And if I turn off normalized for room count, what I'm going to get are the hard numbers. So now we're seeing it. Let's just go with doors and windows again, and we'll sort that in ascending. So now we're seeing that that property, if we take out the room divider, it's 2,600 roughly requests within the date range versus any of the others. So you can see how that impacts normalizing, how it flattens it out and lets you see properties side by side versus just counting up numbers, because it does change the value that you see. The next report we're going to look at is the work request origin. Let's just go look at that. In this report, we have the origins. So now we can see from where work is reported. So again, I'm going to click on that green ball, which is the favorite, so we can see it very clearly, which helps us understand the data a little better. And you can see within this, we see desktop, voice, iPhone, mobile, quick ticket. So let's just go ahead and show hide here. So desktop represents about 3/4, desktop being the computer, represents about 3/4 of where work is coming from, with iPhone and voice, etc., and the mobile app. So that's good. It's pretty good. This will help you determine how properties are using the program. So if we look at Vancouver, majority of their calls are coming in either from desktop or voice. So they're not very big iPhone users. And that may be the case in some properties. This gives you the visibility to see where things are coming from. So let's scroll down here and just pick another one. How about Phoenix downtown? Okay, so yeah, mostly voice if they're not using desktop, with a little bit of iPhone. Again, just a useful tool to help you see how properties are using these different tools. So South Coast Plaza uses, actually, voice and iPhone are the primary tools. This is a very mobile property, where desktop for originating work is a much smaller number. So these individuals are creating things on the fly as they walk the property, as opposed to being in front of a desk. Now that may be that they are creating a lot of their own work as opposed to using the PBX or guest services to do that for them through a computer. Just another reason. We have another report that follows this one, which is the actual departments that report. So we would look at the same property by department and see, in fact, yes, engineering is creating most of their own work as opposed to relying on PBX or guest services to do that for them. Let's look at the departments that actually create work. So I'm going to click on my favorite and show you the chart, because I like the chart. It helps me see things. So 172,000 work requests are reported by engineering compared to 80,000 by guest services, 66 by housekeeping, etc. So on down the line. Guest services, PBX is one department, guest services another. So this allows us then to see, okay, who is reporting things like that. So once again, if we normalize it, we can see the data a little more clearly when it comes to comparing properties to one another because of their room counts. So let's go ahead and open this up and normalize it, and then run that report. And now we can see, if we highlight one of these columns, for instance, we can see who's reporting the most, depending on the department necessary. It looks like Orlando Resort is doing the most of anyone. Although here we go. Here's one, a diplomat, which is now leading the pack. So we can also organize these. We can also organize these by name. So right now we're looking at the value. So engineering has the highest count, as we can see in our chart above. And that's why it's the first column. Guest services PBX followed by housekeeping. That's the way our data is laid out. Maybe that doesn't make sense to us. We want to see things in alphabetical order, which practically they almost are, but maybe we want to see that a little differently. We can organize the columns by name if that makes more sense to us. So now we can see that engineering has, again, the greatest swath, if you will, but they're banquets, convention services, culinary, engineering, executive, etc. So now we've got, in reporting department order, we can see the information, which is very helpful. And then finally, the last part here we'll cover today will be the export tools at the bottom of the chart, the report, and also in the chart. So first of all, we'll cover saving the chart. Right here on the right side where you can choose the type of chart, whether it's pie chart, histogram, or column chart, you can also save this chart. So if you're, for instance, running a report on a single property and you want to share that information with someone at that property, once you get their data up on the screen, you can save the chart. Depending on your browser, it may download directly, in which case you can click on it, and then it will load in a separate form like this. Or it may download with a Save As feature where you can store it on your hard drive and attach it to an email and send it to someone. Along the same lines, down at the bottom of your report, you can copy and paste data. If you click that, you get a little window that pops up. And that then holds all the data, and you can literally copy and paste and drop that right in Excel. That's one way to do it. You can download a CSV, in which case it'll download the CSV to your hard drive, and then you can click on it and load it in Excel or what have you. Or you can quick print the data, which will bring up a print dialog box like this. So you can just print the data straight out of the report. So the data within corporate reporting is not only easy to manipulate, but you can also save it outside of this if you choose to use that in some other way.